Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is the very first episode. So this is just a Hello World episode introducing the podcast and what it's all about as well as who I am. I plan to release the second episode at the same time or shortly afterwards, so if you're listening to this then check out your podcast feed for episode number 2. So let's start with introducing the podcast. This is a software development podcast. If you're a software developer, then you probably already know this by the name Unhandled Exception. But if you're not a developer or you don't want to be one, then you're probably in the wrong place. I'm primarily a .NET developer. I do front-end, architecture, Azure stuff too. My background is that I started off doing 3D technologies over 20 years ago now, and the first half of my career was in the games industry doing C and C++. The latter half has been more focused on .NET. I've done both web and desktop development. So the aim of this podcast is to cover a wide variety of developer topics. There's going to be talk on .NET and Azure because I'm a .NET developer that uses Azure, so I'm perhaps a little bit biased. But there's also going to be lots of other topics as well, things like Git, Docker, Kubernetes, automated testing, best practices, all this kind of stuff. So the plan is I want to have a mix of me doing talks like this, where I'm talking about a particular topic, or some episodes will invite guests on. There's not going to be a fixed schedule. Releases are going to be fairly ad hoc, but hopefully fairly frequent. If you click subscribe in your favourite podcast app, then you'll get notified when new episodes drop. And there's also a dedicated website, unhandledexceptionpodcast.com, where there'll be show notes for each episode. So I'm a massive fan of podcasts. I've been an avid listener for many years now. And that's one of the reasons why I became so passionate about software development. Hearing the passion that the hosts and the guests have in our industry just became really contagious. And then I started the blog, danclark.com. This was years ago. And also later I started a .NET user group called .NET Oxford, which has now been going for nearly 4 years. And I'll talk more about .NET Oxford in a minute. But as part of .NET Oxford, I started getting into public speaking. And I've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now. And then at the start of lockdown with COVID, because I knew I was going to be working remotely full time and also had to host .NET Oxford virtually, I decided to invest in a decent microphone. I went with the Blue Yeti X, and I'm really glad I did because the new contract I started shortly afterwards was 100% remote and we pair program all day long, so the mic makes a big difference. After the initial investment of getting the mic, this is when I decided to start giving podcasting an actual go. Unfortunately, with me working all day and the kids being at home all day, any free time before work, during lunch or after work just vanished. So it didn't happen at the time, but now the kids are back at school, now I'm giving it a go. At this point, it's just an experiment. So any feedback is really greatly appreciated. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please let me know. Help spread the word on social media. If you don't, please let me know why as well, so I can try and improve the podcast. The podcast is being sponsored by my own company, Everstack Limited. I'm a contractor and all my client work goes through Everstack. We do full stack development and consultation services. You can check out everstack.com for more information. So I mentioned .NET Oxford a couple of times now, so before wrapping up, let's talk a little bit about that. So I started this nearly 4 years ago, together with an ex-colleague, Matt Neal. This has been a physical event up until the lockdown, but it's been virtual ever since the lockdown started. To be honest, I've been really surprised with how well this has worked virtually. We use Zoom, we have lots of people are turning on the webcams, and it's a really good community vibe. We always have a virtual pub session afterwards. So when it was physical, a few of us went to a real pub afterwards, but now obviously that's not possible at the moment. So when it's virtual, some people just hang around, bring in their own drinks obviously, and just have a geek out afterwards. It's really great fun, and I'm just been amazed with how well it's continued to work after the lockdown. If COVID had happened 5-10 years earlier, it would have been so different. So I've personally been amazed by how well the .NET Oxford community has grown. Over the 4 years, I've met so many amazing people through doing it, and it's helped grow my career as well. So to say that starting .NET Oxford has been life-changing is kind of a big understatement. And if you're interested, we do also have a Slack group, which you can join via the website, .NEToxford.com. I was also involved in starting a second user group last year about Azure. and this was with someone I met through .NET Oxford, James World, but we decided to temporarily put this on hold when the lockdown started, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with this, but we'll see. So I think this wraps up the very first episode. As I mentioned earlier, if you're listening to this, the next episode should already be in your podcast feed. And the best way to get in touch with me is via Twitter. My handle is @Dracan, DRACAN, and my DMs are wide open. And all my social links are on my blog, danclark.com. So please do help me spread the word. As I mentioned earlier, any feedback is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.